Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's known as that healthy kid with the radical haircut.
Tim Longo.
Probably another thing you don't see, because the translations can be different, but that at some point is how after Chrono has passed, somebody says, "Oh, I like that healthy kid with the radical haircut."
I don't think
or where's that healthy kid with the radical haircut? I don't even remember who says it, but
it's some ringing a bell, yeah. But I don't think it was.
It's somebody important. It's like a guru or something like somebody who's kind of big and important, but maybe kind of like Melchior, who's forgetful. Probably him.
Yeah, or Guru of Time. Maybe when you get to the end of time. After Chrono's gone,
yeah, very, very possible. Yes, because you can actually at that point talk with all of the party members and hear what they have to say about Chrono dying. Anyway, we are talking about Chrono Trigger. Yeah, we're gonna hit some story stuff, and also, I guess before we even get started, we should probably just say we've extended this game for another week for a couple of reasons, mostly because of the substantial amount of end game content, let's say. We were kind of chugging along, and we were both going to really have to squeeze and not do some stuff that we wanted to do. And so we've decided to extend our play. But let's start with recapping the things we did in common up to... well, I guess up to the end of Blackbird and getting to the Faded Hour, I guess, is when you get to Magus and have a decision to make with him. I think is basically the last thing there. Oh, and then the Chrono egg. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically. I think it's after the egg is resolved, right? And then
I think that's when they call it the Faded. Yeah, because before that, the chapter is the Time Egg, which is the Chrono thing. So we had left off about to head over to the Ocean Palace last time, and the whole intrigue about the Ocean Palace has been that Shala, the daughter of the queen, is a powerful mage, and her mother has been basically using her to power whatever they're doing to Lavos. They're trying to draw energy from Lavos, and the queen wants to live forever. And so she's building this palace underneath the ocean as a way to get A, closer to Lavos, and B, be able to tap into all his energy. Do I have that kind of basically right? I mean, that's basically what's going on, right?
I think so. Yeah, the Mammon machine and yeah.
Right, the Mammon machine, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the conceit for how they're tapping the power. And yeah, the obviously the Ocean Palace is probably closer to the Earth's core or whatever. And so that's the idea. And I feel like they kind of don't develop the queen as much as maybe they did in other, because every age sort of has its sort of story arc, right? Where there's usually some sort of nemesis that you're dealing with. And I feel like in most of the other cases, they were a little better developed. The queen kind of comes off as like I don't know, maybe there's something I missed, but by the time I feel like all that was resolved, I don't want to say something that maybe it is resolved actually later. But anyway, I feel like once we finished that sort of palace area, I feel like the queen was a little sort of two-dimensional. But anyway, yeah. So she's tapping in, and there's a couple moments when you meet her, also with a few other people with her, right? You have the prophet at that point,
yep, and Dalton.
And Dalton, which you made a point a couple episodes ago about sort of the naming of things around the time, of translations. The only thing I can think of is Timothy Dalton. It's maybe around the time when he was James Bond. I was like, and then Blackbird, of course, is X-Men's jet. So I don't know.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's very likely that I would not remember that, but yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So the prophet's there. Who else is there?
The two kids are there. Shala and Janice are both there at different points. I think Janice kind of comes in and out.
Yeah, there's some, but isn't there another adult?
Maybe one of the gurus.
Maybe a guru, yeah. There's or like another counselor or something, or chancellor. Sorry,
Probably a chancellor. You can never trust them.
Yeah, those yeah. So anyway, yeah, but who? It's a little cloudy for me because I think I hit that at the end of the last session. Who do we fight there?
So on our way into that, there is sort of a fighting section with a number of elemental-based enemies that are sort of in different pairings of like, oh, there'll be a lightning one with a fire one, and they're right, and they're only susceptible to, yeah, they fly, and then there's other kind of nuisance monsters to fight there. But then ultimately, basically, Dalton throws the Golem Twins at you.
Right.
In order to basically slow you down before you get to the Mammon machine, which is about to be turned on. And he's just trying to slow you down so they can do that, I guess. And that, I remember, I think I made a note that battle was difficult or frustrating. I definitely did. I know I did. I just wrote Golem battle, good God. So that one I found difficult, apparently. But now I'm not entirely sure why. They're the ones that they pick up what you do to them and reflect it back to you.
Right. Yep. That's right.
So I was doing big attacks, like my biggest attacks. I'm like, oh, boss, I should pull out all the stops. I should use my falcon, thing that throws that Ayla throws Chrono through the enemies, and it does a couple thousand damage, and they basically reflect that back and kill me very quickly by doing tons of physical damage. So I was having a real trouble with that. It does kind of point out, and somebody had pointed out on the stream, that a lot of the bosses are puzzles, right? They're not straight up slugfests.
I had the same. Right, I had the same note. Yep, it's a good point.
Yeah, which I appreciate, and actually helped me. That somebody making note of that actually helped me later when I had to fight a Lavos shard or whatever it was called.
Spawn,
yeah. That was also quite difficult until you figured out what the trick was. So yeah. Anyway, so we fight them, and then we get to the Ocean Palace, and then we basically have an extended cutscene. One of the many in this game where you have that sort of weird wait, hit A to advance past text, and sometimes just see some cutscene, and then it's kind of all scripted in the 2D engine or whatever. And she basically turns it on, raises Lavos, who turns out to be this big, enormous, like spiky thing with a weird
a cosmic horror thing. Yeah, it's all full circle. This game has everything. It even has a giant creature from outer space. Can I interrupt hold that moment? I want to interrupt. I forgot to tell you in pre-show. One thing I want to mention is I've already fought Lavos. Like, I spent maybe 15 to 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. I forgot to tell you that. Now, okay. What I mean by that is when at the beginning of this session, you're given, I guess it was the first time that we getting free reign with the epoch,
mm-hmm.
Which
Epona.
Is yeah. Okay. And so in that list, which you actually could always do from the end of time anyway, because there's a little activation point to go back to 1999 from the end of time.
Oh, yes. I also did this at one point.
Okay, yeah. So you can do this at any time, but it makes it really easy when you're in the Wings of Time, I think is the name of the ship for me. So I went there. I went to, I think it's called the Catastrophe or something like that, the Cataclysm. So I went there, and pretty quickly you get to the point where you're fighting him in the same location that we are about to talk about with the Ocean Palace sequence, with that sort of like effect underneath, the sort of watery effect underneath. And I was like, okay, well, I'm here. I'm pretty, we're far into the game. I'm pretty high level. Let's just see what happens. So I'm mixed on whether I spoiled some things for myself about how that, if the fight does go down the same way, I'm mixed on whether I spoiled some things for myself about it. And I actually won't talk about it in detail here for your sake if you hadn't fought him.
Yeah, mine was different. So
Oh, okay.
I went a lot earlier.
Okay, yeah, what happened?
Like, it just destroys you. It just says, the game just ends, basically. You go there, and it's like, and you die. So I did that like two sessions ago or something like that, and just got... There was no even going anywhere. It was just like, oh, you're not even powerful enough to even deign to approach me. Like, it's just this world is just too hot for you. It's just basically a solid... I mean, the timekeeper or whatever, the guru of time, basically tells you, don't go there. Yeah, what are you doing? If you want to die, go there. Is basically what he says.
Right.
And I was like, well, how bad could it really be? Turns out pretty bad.
So I don't know. So something must change at a point when you maybe get to a certain level or a certain part of the story. So it didn't do that. That's what I expected to happen because he had told me that as well. And so because it was on the list of options, I was like, well, I'm going to go there, of course. And so I went, and you do end up fighting him. And I made it through to what I think is probably like one of the later phases of the fight. And basically it was just, there was no hope at that point. Like, I definitely couldn't have finished, but I did feel pretty good about how far I got. But it does give you a choice at some point where it actually, one of the party members will say, hey, Chrono, are you sure we want to do this right now? and you have a yes, no. And I said, yes. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And the other thing that I did before we started the session, probably at least a couple hours on, is I went back through the whole game looking for those magic chests and doors. I literally scoured the entire game to look for all of those, which I do sort of regret at this point. But it did eat up time. So anyway, we're back to the Ocean Palace.
I have been finding them as well, but I've been finding them more organically. There were some that I was like, oh yeah, there's definitely one in this place, near the castle and things like that. So there were times where I was like, I'm pretty sure there's one here, and I'd go kind of looking and be like, maybe it's in 600 or whatever. I
think that was the way to do it. That's really and not to do it the way I did it.
Yeah, I think that's been fine, and it hasn't been. I mean, occasionally they hold stronger ethers or something like that, but they haven't been amazing. Yeah, there hasn't been one I've opened and been like, oh, thank God I found this or whatever. I don't think so.
Have you seen the blue pyramid thing that I told you about the other day? Did you open that up? Blue pyramid. Okay, yeah, because that's the only one that's related to the magic chest that I did open and found a weapon that has not been overtaken by anything else. It's it's the highest, it's the best weapon.
It might be Chrono's ultimate weapon. Yeah,
I don't know if oh right, there's that whole ultimate weapon thing that the JRPGs do. I don't know if it is or not, but it's
I don't know if this one has. I mean, there's always an ultimate weapon. There's always one weapon that does the most damage. So right, I mean, it's just they call it the ultimate weapon to make a big deal out of it in Final Fantasy in particular. But there's always an ultimate weapon. The one that does the most damage is the ultimate weapon. That's just the way it works.
Okay.
But anyway, in the cutscene, basically, Shala's pendant is used to power up Lavos more. Janice comes in and tries to save her. And then the party basically tries to fight, but is immediately knocked down by Lavos.
Yeah.
And that's when Magus turns up. And now he's going to fight, but he also gets knocked down, thinking he was going to be strong. Oh, that's right. He's the prophet, right? He reveals himself, I should say. He doesn't appear. He reveals himself. And he gets knocked out. And all looks pretty bad. But Chrono struggles to his feet, and he climbs forward. And then Lavos just alone you know,
Well, you have a
struggling.
choice too, right? Did they ask you?
They ask you if you want to run away, right?
Right.
Who wants? What kind of hero would we be? I'm
I
sure you
know.
said no.
I said no as well, but I do wonder what happens. So, you know, I don't, someone can tell us or we can look it up. But yeah, anyway, I'm sure the same thing happens because this is so important.
I'm not sure because this is a game that has a lot of endings. So potentially there's a different ending there.
Really?
But yeah. Anyway, Cronus approaches Lavos as if he's going to try to do whatever he can. He's not going to give up. And he gets obliterated. Just purely, entirely blown away. Yeah. And the party sees this, I guess, and then are knocked out and fall through a time portal, basically, again.
Another thing to mention is when Magus reveals himself as the prophet, he also sort of reveals his true intentions with Lavos. And he's been sort of painted as the villain who's been trying to, at least in 600, trying to resurrect, but it turns out he's been trying to.
Right. You only wanted to summon it so that he could destroy it.
Right.
In 600. Yes. Right. So he does reveal that important information, which will,
like you said, yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
Yeah, and then we portal back. Right. I don't remember. Are we still in that age? And I guess we are, but it's just your other two party members are there, and Chrono's gone.
Yeah, you end up like in the Earthbound area, right, or something.
Right.
Like you were.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yep. Yeah, some little huts that they've built.
Then when does everything blow up? Like the continents, right, and in that era. And you know what I mean, where the islands fall, and that's when it happens, right? Because you're just left with that one island that's all snowy, and the Earthbound and the what are they called? Enlightened, right? Are living together and stuff because they have no choice or whatever.
I think of them as the Sneeches, the ones with stars upon theirs, and the ones without.
Got it. All right, good. Yeah, that's quite a deep cut. For the Dr. Seuss fans out there, that's what you're referring to, right?
Yes, which I hope is everyone, but not everybody knows the Sneeches. That's more of a back catalog choice. Anyway, you wake up in a hut with whoever you have. So for me at that point, it was Marley and Ayla, and Marley in particular is really broken up by it. Which comes out later that they're a thing. They seem to be that she has feelings for Chrono. That probably hasn't happened to you, because you have not been using Marley.
No.
So there's been story differences from our choices. So you would have had the frog. You would have had Glenn and Robo at that point, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So how did they react?
Well, let's see. I don't think I had any notes for that specifically. Let me look. Okay. I don't. Let's see. I don't remember anything notable there. Other than just kind of, obviously mourning. Both of them have, a lot of, they're following Chronos, so they're a lot of respect for him. But the more important thing about that moment for me is that finally because Chrono's okay, he's the hero, but he's sort of like, the silent protagonist, whatever, like very vanilla. But my dream came true in that Glenn now is the party leader. Which is hilarious to me that is a thing. But we'll talk about that in a second some more, I'm sure, about the party stuff.
Yeah, I made Ayla the boss the party leader at that point. She's
probably really happy with that.
Yeah, she's a natural leader. She's a chieftain. So it seemed to me she already had she really had the skills. So I figured just put her right in there.
Yep, her fists.
And so then I actually I'm a little rough on how they got captured, but basically Dalton wants their ship and he captures them and imprisons them on.
That's the next thing. Yeah, well,
the next thing they have.
Or because somebody else washes up on shore. that island, but that could have happened after the Blackbird. I forget the order of the Blackbird or the Magus thing happens, right? Where you go.
No, the Magus thing happens later, where you have the opportunity to fight him or not. That happens after you fall off the Blackbird and fight Dalton. And
shows
then
remember, Dalton comes and he says, "Oh, I'm the ruler now because the queen's gone, and I'm going to steal your ship." And then he flies it away, thinking that it's a ship that it's not really, something like that. And then, yeah, but how you get captured? Oh, and he knocks you back in. You're on the island with the snowy island with all of the villagers, and he knocks you back, and you just wake up in the cell, I think.
Okay, yeah. I thought so. I thought he basically there was just a cutscene to capture you.
Yeah.
So why don't you take this section? I think you like this section a little bit more than I did. So why don't you drive it?
You have your Metroid moment, right, where they take away all your stuff, which that's obviously a huge trope in video games. I don't know why, but I didn't really think it'd be something that would happen here. I don't feel like it happens in RPGs very often, but I'm probably wrong on that. So that was kind of a nice little thing. And the thing that we probably talked about with Final Fantasy IX as well, I'm positive we did multiple times, is I don't know if it's just this team's games or JRPGs or Square's games or whatever, but just the concept of all of these unique sort of gameplay scenarios that are put into the game, I'm just constantly impressed by. And so I think the reason I like this section is you wake up in the cell and you have to, the proverbial, how do we get out of jail and find our stuff? And so there's, of course, ducts. And of course, none of that stuff is very creative and unique in this day and age, but having it in this game felt pretty interesting. And who knows where they got the idea from, but you literally can even look through the grates in the ducts to look down, and they even have some artwork that sort of gives you a sort of first person view of what's below you, because you see the grates, the bars of the grate. And so some stuff like that I thought was really clever. And I think you had some frustrations with sort of navigating, and I agree. I mean, I was confused all the time about where to pop out, and there's a lot of trial and error, unfortunately, because the landmarking is not very good. But just, I think for me, I loved it just because I love sort of that sort of stealthy, Metal Geary kind of like we're moving around this ship. Another small moment in that section that I really thought was clever is they give you a way to get out on the edge of the ship, to get outside, to sort of present you. They could have just told you you're in the Blackbird and left it at that, but they actually put time and effort into giving you this little door you can go out to see, or ladder actually, that you can see and stand on sort of like the outside of the ship. So you get a sense of it, you know what I mean? Oh, we're on the ship and we're out, and it's flying, etc. And another sort of small detail is they turn the audio on after you go out there. So before you go on outside up the ladder, you don't know you're on the ship. So, it's kind of a nice little reveal, I thought. And then you just feel like an infiltrator, right? You're moving around through the ducts, you're going down, trying to figure out, and there's, there is one room where one of the guards is sleeping. And so you go down there and you get, in my case, Frog's equipment first. So that gives you the ability, because if you're spotted by anybody before that, then they just put you back in jail. Another part of the sort of trope. And then
okay. So yeah, that didn't happen to me, but I didn't get seen before I found the room with the sleeping guard.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I sort of went down a bunch of different areas to see what you could do. And you actually can kind of sneak by some of them without them seeing you pretty easily in most cases. But eventually, if you don't know exactly where you're going, because the ducks have like some lighting trickery they're doing to kind of obfuscate exactly where you need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, once you get some equipment, you can just start fighting everybody. And then, it's each party member has a chest someplace where you go and get their equipment, and you have to get your money in one chest, and you have to get your inventory in one chest. And so it's a total of 5 chests, I think. And then you're able to leave sort of up and get onto one of the giant wings of the Blackbird. And there's some sentry robots up there that self-destruct, I think, and stuff. But then sort of inexplicably, I think I sort of accidentally just kind of hit the trigger where it progresses.
The trigger's way out on the wing, the back end of the wing. I had basically gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to walk along the wing and see if it's going to blow me off anywhere, because I was just at that point just going, this had been the second time I'd been out on the wing. And that was my big frustration, is that I had once I had gotten all my gear, I had actually not even gotten all my gear, I think, the first time I went out on the wing, because I had difficulty even finding the third bit of gear, or the whatever. There's 5 things, because it's also your items and something else that are
your money and your items.
Oh, your money and your items, right? Yeah. So 3 characters, your money and your items. Of course, I had Ayla in my party. I'm like, why does she need her gear? She just fights with her fists. So that was also a thing. And of course, it was her gear I found first. I'm like, great, I found her fists. So there were a lot of kind of things where it just didn't totally land for me. But the biggest thing was crawling around in the ducts thinking I had missed something, because when I went out on the wing and went all the way out to the end of the wing and came all the way back, and nothing happened, I was like, oh, that's okay. That's weird. And after a lot of wandering around and literally putting the right hand on the wall or left hand on the wall and doing the whole maze of the ductwork again and again, I said, okay, this is not where it is. And was like, well, where else is there? I went out on the starting place, and then I went back to the wing. So I spent a ton of time just
you were supposed
lost?
To be on the wing, but
exactly, but I didn't know, because I'd been on the wing and nothing happened, and I don't think I had all my gear yet, so maybe it didn't even trigger. So it just was. Yeah, that's right. It just happened wrong to me, right? And so if it happened in the right order, I'm sure it would have been fine, but it didn't happen in the right order. So I got very, very frustrated, because I was like, okay, well, this was cool until I did it a billion times, looking through all the windows. Am I missing something? I'm like, it's sort of like having an adventure game where there's a pixel hunt and you thought you looked everywhere in a room, and turns out you didn't, because even finding the trigger was that way. Was that there was a specific spot on the wing that had to go to all the way out and all the way to the bottom, to actually find the exact spot, to trigger the Golem boss, which Dalton had threatened with after the Golem Twins. I think he's like, I'm going to send the Golem boss after you. I'm like, oh no, not another one. But the Mammon machine got completed then. So,
right. So then you
beat the Golem,
right? You beat the Golem, and then he's in the ship shooting at you, right?
Right.
But then you jump onto your ship.
You jump all the way down to fight Dalton on top of the wings of time. Yes. Which is pretty wild.
Yeah. And then you scare him off. Now that I think about it, whatever happens to him, you don't actually fully defeat him ever, I don't think. But anyway,
I think implicitly you've knocked him off of a flying ship from a very great height.
Maybe. I thought he warped out of that, though there was a teleport there, but maybe I'm wrong. So Frog now, in my case, is fumbling around trying to fly the thing. I think you end up shooting down the Blackbird at that point, right?
Yes. Sort of accidentally.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're doing. Oh, you do actually have control to do it, though? Don't you have, you can hit the L and R and A and B buttons, or X and Y to do different things with your...
For me, it's A and X. Yeah, you can do different things.
With the shoulders, yeah.
I didn't do anything with shoulders. Maybe they didn't tell me that, or I missed it or something. I think you can... feel like it kind of automatically happened for me, but...
Yeah, I think I just was fiddling with all the buttons, and then ultimately, I think it's basically just, you don't know what you're doing. You're trying all the switches to try to figure out how to fly this thing, because Dalton has modified it to make it actually free flying.
Yeah.
And it turns into, therefore, a free crashing ship for you, because you land basically where Magus is. I don't remember if it's exactly where he is, but you're
back on that island, right? And then you can go into
climb the caves.
There's a bluff right up northern, what's not a bluff, but what do they call it? Kind of a peninsula or whatever up in that island. And the villagers tell you that somebody washed up. You say, oh, we need to go find Chrono and see did something, is there anything we can do? Is he gone? Is he gone? And so that's at least what my guys were saying. And then the villagers say, hey, somebody, I don't know if it's who you're looking for, but somebody washed up on the peninsula.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so you can go up there and it's a location, which I wonder if it's the same peninsula later that comes up. Anyway, and so it's not Chrono. It is Magus, who is part of the sort of crashing of the continents as well. So he did survive. And like Brett said, there's an option there where once he starts talking to you that you can fight him. Neither of us did. Both of us, and in my case, God, the history that these characters have with each other at this point is so cool, at least in my case, because obviously Frog and Magus have a deep history at this point, right? So right. Frog is my leader right now, and he comes up and Magus is there. And I forget the voice lines exactly what Magus is saying, but they give you the option of like, okay, are you going to fight or not? And I said no. And Frog says something awesome there. I didn't write it down, but it's something like, no, I'm not going to fight you. Killing you is not going to bring Cyrus and Chrono back. So it just hits you because you have this like, Magus is the guy that killed Cyrus, right? And essentially is responsible for turning him into a frog. And so there's just this awesome, like, you can just see Frog putting his sword down and saying, no, I'm not going to be that guy. It's just a nice little touching pixel moment, a pixel art moment that I'm putting a lot more onto than was actually there. But I think it's a testament to the sort of history that this game has put these characters through, for the player.
So were you given the opportunity? I don't know if this happens for you if you say no initially, but apparently with Frog in the party, you can have the opportunity to go face to face with Magus, just the two of you, Magus and the Frog.
I wonder if that's what would have happened if I'd said yes.
Yes, perhaps, because apparently you can then still choose to spare him when you've defeated him or not.
Whoa.
If you choose to fight Magus, Glenn gets cured.
No, you're kidding me. You're making that up.
I am not. I have looked this up.
What?
Because I was wondering what happened. I knew that there was an opportunity to fight one-on-one.
What is happening? That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my. So the sequence would have been fight, choose to do a one-on-one, beat him, and
beat him, and I think you can choose to spare or kill him. I don't think it matters. I think either way, you're returned to who you are.
So it's like you get redemption, wow.
You break his power, or who knows?
Holy cow, that's incredible. So then I would have been playing with Glenn, not as a
with frog. Glenn, I guess.
It's amazing. I cannot. I still don't believe you. I think you're making this would be something you would have made up too. I could totally.
It's the sort of thing I would make up just to mess with you, but it's not.
Wow.
It's true.
That stuff's happening all through. I feel like it's only ramped up from here. Like we'll get to it later, but like the game has that kind of stuff happening all over the place. I feel like now, but that's amazing. But no, Frog honorably put his sword down, and Magus joined us, and so I guess that's an awkward situation for everybody. Now that I think about it. So yeah, I palled around. I had him in the party for a little while, but I eventually anyway, we'll talk about the next section. So yeah, he comes with you, but I forget exactly the order of operations, but before he joins you is when he basically gives his monologue, right?
Yes. Somewhere
in there, which reveals a whole lot of stuff. One, we knew we obviously know that he was the prophet and what his true intentions were. But what I didn't see coming that Brett did, you should say it because you figured it out.
Yeah. So I knew. So when I was playing, there's a moment in your battle with Magus when you face him the first time in 600 that he says, "The black wind blows," and at the time that he said that, I was like, okay, that's like Jules in Pulp Fiction and the sort of thing he says before he's about to kill a couple of guys. I was like, okay, whatever. That's just a cool thing that he says. But then when you go to, I forget, it's like Enkasa or something, Kaha or something like that. The one of the dream cities in 2300 or 12,000 BC, you can go and talk to all the people in this area, and Janus the kid is one of them. Mm-hmm. And if you pester him, he says the black wind blows. Yeah. So it totally tips the hand at that point. And I so every time I would say, I'd see Janus in a cutscene or Magus in a cutscene, I would say, or should I say Janus or should I say Magus? So I knew while I was streaming the whole time, I was probably annoying. Clearly this is who this is going to be. He also has blue hair, so there's a bit of an art tell as well.
Well, but Magus has white hair, right? Or am I
I think he has bluish hair.
Maybe it's bluish white, yeah. Also, I've seen him in an anime form, so it's a little bit different maybe for you.
Oh, yeah, a little bit different for you,
yeah. Wow, yeah. So he reveals that, but also he does a sort of like, I don't know if it's a memory, sort of like flashback kind of memory where he kind of describes everything that's been happening. He talks about his true intentions for Lavos, which we already covered, but he also goes back and shows the moment that the queen sort of started all of this with the mammon machine or whatever. And the reason that's important is it also shows what happened to the three gurus in a very, very explicit way. And that's also when Janus gets teleported to 600 as a child. No. Would it be earlier? Because he grows up. Yeah, when would that have been?
I mean, it was around that.
I guess it's around that. Yeah. So it's like whatever, 30 years before.
20 years before 600. Yeah.
So he gets teleported, and then you're like, oh, he grew up to be the Fiend Lord. That's amazing. I didn't see that coming. So that was a good surprise for me because I'm unobservant in the voice line connection there. But then it shows where Malchior goes, which we knew about. It shows where who are the rest of them? Balthazar? No, that's a Shakespearean character.
It is Balthazar.
Is it Balthazar? Okay.
And Gaspar is the one. I can't.
Yeah. He obviously he's the one in the future that's put his consciousness into the construct. But I just kind of like it ties a bow and everything there, which I thought was nice. And so you kind of see how everything was spread around, and it obviously instantly changes and gives you some new respect for the character of Magus, I think, and sort of everything that he's been going through. Again, I think another good example of giving a deep history to some pixels, and some good writing. But then he joins you. You're back on the island. But the big thing now is you have the ship that can fly, right?
You have the flying ship. You also know what you need to do if you're going to get Chrono back. And I don't remember who exactly tells you that. It might be. Yeah, you get a time egg from Gaspar.
Yeah, somebody gives you a clue. I forget who it is, but somebody gives you a clue that
says you should talk to Balthazar. So maybe like Melchior sends you to Gaspar, who sends you to Balthazar or something like that.
Yeah, you have to go back
because Melchior is right there. Melchior is there in the in the village.
Yeah, you have to go to the future. Also, they disable the ship kit doesn't work right away or something, right? So you can't do it so easily. So you end up having to go to the So eventually you get back to the end of time.
They basically bring it to you afterwards, right? After you've gone and talked to Melchior. So I think Melchior says, hey, you should talk to Gaspar and see if there's anything that you can do.
Yeah. And
Gaspar tells you, oh, well, I have this time egg that you can use, but you have to ask Balthazar what to do with it. And Balthazar tells you need to go to Death Peak. If you're to revive a person at all, they have to be important to time and space. And you need a clone of them. And if you don't have one, you can get one from this particular character, Nolstein Beckier. I can't read my handwriting. Who's at a festival, who likes to hang out at festivals, and turns out to be at the Millennial Fair.
Which I had known because I'd actually gone in and done his games multiple times, so I actually knew exactly what they were talking about. I just hadn't succeeded at the one that gives you the doll. So I actually asked Brett in the pre-show, which you confirmed, that if I had succeeded, I could have had access to the doll already. So that's another example of having something out of order where, you know, if I'd done things in a certain way, the jerky is another example, that you would have the item, I guess. So it gives you the egg. You could have maybe talked to him right away, you know, again, and said, well, I have the doll now. Can we do this? What do I do? You know, so maybe. But, you know, I think I wrote a note down about sort of full circleness of it, you know, where they're doing a good job. You know, there's sort of the production aspects of, okay, they're reusing locations and assets and stuff. There's the sort of cynical production side of that. But there's also this is a pretty interconnected, cohesive world where when someone says you need to find this guy who hangs out at a fair, you know exactly where to go. You probably know who he is. It has some resonance with you because you've spent so much time there. That's where the game started, you know. So I don't know, kind of nice symmetry to all that for me. I found that copy, you know, Simon Says puzzle or Simon Says game frustrating. For me, it was mostly I just didn't understand the controls, which it says, I mean, you basically do these 4 things, but I was holding the button down. Oh, yeah.
And so whenever it would do the next thing, I would still have the button down and would immediately fail.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of like press and let go. I had them held down because I thought I was supposed to hold the position or something like that. I was like
he's holding.
You're holding the pose. I'm trying to do what he's doing. I'm just holding that pose. And so he'd have his left arm up, and then he'd put his right arm up, and I go, you're done. And I go, what? Wait, I didn't. And I was like, how am I going to do this? I was really frustrated.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I finally worked out. It was just like, just press it and let go. And just pay attention to do it quickly. And then as soon as I realized that, I did it the first try, or maybe the second try. I think the first time I forgot the buttons because I had done it a bunch of times and was really frustrated. The other thing, and so getting the clone and the time egg to the top of Death Peak. How about those trees?
Oh, with the Christmas tree lights?
Well, I meant the ones where the wind blows you back down.
Oh, yeah. What about them? Oh, you just mean
that was
frustrating.
It was very frustrating for me. I had the worst time of that.
And you were listening.
Part of it, I think, is that my controller. I have an official classic controller for the Wii. I'm playing this on the Wii via.
You playing with analog?
Virtual. I mostly play with the stick. And actually, it's fine. It's the better way to play it. The analog pad is a little looser, because I have an official analog pad.
I'm playing a D-pad. I'm using an Xbox controller, but I'm not using a stick. I'm using a D-pad.
Yeah, the SNES, the actual SNES controller is slightly tighter, so it's actually easier to hold the directional positions. So getting up to those trees and staying in place, it's the worst.
Probably the slippery part was also frustrating then.
Yeah, the slippery part was not as bad because you don't go back as far, or it didn't feel as bad. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't bother me as much. You had to fight one enemy and go back up, and like at that point, I was like, okay, this whole section is just going to be a pain in the butt. That one wasn't horrible, but I also just was like, I had these times where I was like, am I just not doing the right thing? Like, did I miss something here? And it. So there were a lot of those like weird frustrations, which is It's funny. I mean, I'm loving the game, and at the same time, there are times where this whole section of trying to actually get to the top of the Death Peak. I was saying I really respect the QA person who was telling Sakaguchi not to put this in the game and being overruled.
Yeah.
Sakaguchi-san, you cannot.
Well, the flip side of that, though, is QA probably became very good at it, right? So
exactly,
yeah. They may not have because they were blinded. You know, that's a typical problem.
Well, plus they had a SNES controller, which might have been easier designed to your controller.
Right.
And I think that the looseness of both the stick and the D-pad on the classic controller are not great. not what they should be for this.
I don't remember that controller being great. I don't have one anymore, but the ironically the Xbox is working great for me.
Very great for you, of course.
Yeah. So you get up. Finally, you get up there through some trials and tribulations. You do fight, like you mentioned, some. There is a moment I did want to mention though. The last sort of challenge. I wrote the quote down. What is it? Pushing you something about the shell. I wanted to see if it was the same as yours. Oh man!
I didn't write it down, so I can't tell you. But I mean, you have to push the shell,
climb the shell, or something like that. And you're like, what?
I think it was basically that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting and clever. Again, a little unique moment, right? That you don't see coming. And those are Lavos spawns that we're fighting that are pretty hard, pretty tough mini bosses, if you will. But yeah, you literally push this.
You have to attack their mouth only.
Right. Well, I use a lot of areas, so I hit everything. So
right, but that does a ton of damage to you if you do that because it sends the spikes every time you hit the back.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't figure that out. I just healed through it.
Oh, so you were just fast enough on the healing? Yeah, I was not. I was having the worst time with that. I had one, and that was after climbing those trees, and there is a save right before it that I didn't find, so I had to climb the trees, and then I'd get to that cave, and I'd get killed, and like without having like doing 2 attacks, and I'd be like, okay, what am I?
Yikes! Yeah. So certain color palettes, they change the color of the spawn or the save to blue because green doesn't show up as well. I noticed that. And so it's probably more easily missed maybe for you, but that's a bummer. Yeah.
Well, it's for me all the time. I mean, that may just be a difference for you.
What's that?
Because you have my save spots are always blue.
Oh, mine are green usually, like except for a couple of instances.
Weird choices. The different things that they made different. Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, no, I have a feeling that I brute forced my way through lots of stuff like that and don't really figure the puzzle out because I was getting hit every time. Well, I have 2 healers in my party, so I just like have both of them healing, and then I just have Chrono doing major damage. So that's my usual tactic. It takes a while.
Logo at that point or something.
What's that?
You didn't have Chrono at that point.
Oh yeah, so I was using who was I using then?
Bobo.
It must have been Magus. I guess I was just doing some
heal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so he was just doing area spells. Oh yeah, that would make sense.
Or both healers, yeah, they can be. So.
Oh okay.
But yeah, so yeah, you get to the top eventually, climbing on the husk of one of those things, and then, the egg. The egg flies in the air. You swap out. That's right. There's a time, what do they call it? A time freeze or something happens, and Magus is pretty impressed.
So here's the cool thing about that. This was the Back to the Future moment, which I'll have to explain maybe because you may not know this either. But when you originally see this cutscene, there is a moment when Lavos is destroying Chrono where you can see the clone taking his place.
What do you mean? The first time?
The first time. There's like a shadow Chrono.
Okay, but So what do you mean?
So it already happened. Like the fact that you're doing it.
You're talking about a time paradox.
Well, I'm talking about not a paradox because it already happened. You've already replaced Chrono, the clone, with the real Chrono.
So he didn't die because you.
Right. So it's almost weird that he has a moment of like what happened, because it's like, well, nothing happened because you just went from the moment you were about to be destroyed into this moment. That was the next moment for you. Whereas we had all these other adventures. So they all effectively have, whatever amount of time that takes place, that things are happening. Yeah. And he has none of that, which I thought was kind of funny. But do you know the Back to the Future thing, which I refer to?
I mean, probably. I mean, I know those movies. So at the
beginning of Back to the Future, when he's at the mall,
yeah,
right there in the parking lot of the mall, and Doc Brown's showing him the DeLorean.
Yeah.
There's a shot of Marty McFly, and over his back shoulder in the distance, there's a square of light from a window, and a shadow passes across it, which is Marty returning to that spot from the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So
no, I don't think I did not know that. No,
it's very quick.
Yeah, but
cool. It's there.
They're trying to keep the paradox from not happening. But all that said, I mean, we don't want to get into this, but it's impossible to actually, right? I mean, yeah, there's no win. It's a no-win situation. You just got to go with it, because it's not really a loop like that. There had to have been one first time, right? That's why they're all.
Well, let's not get all quantum mechanical.
Okay, I know that's what I mean. I don't think we should, but it's cool that they tried.
It's cool that they've come up with an answer, and they've tried to make it consistent with what happens later from your player perspective. Yes.
Yeah, that's neat.
Because in Back to the Future, the Marty McFly coming back would not be the same Marty McFly who went, because his world has changed if it were to be consistent with quantum physics. Anyway.
This is why we need to make a time travel game. The whole conceit is this stuff.
You need me. You need me in all my physics.
Apparently I would, but I don't want to make this game. It sounds too hard.
It's too much.
Too much. We will go insane trying to do this. But if this podcast and this series created the desire, then maybe we should. Anyway, so we bring him back through a doppel doll and an egg, which, by the way, they called, in my translation, the egg is called the Chrono Trigger.
Really?
And you said your ship is called the Chrono Trigger, right? Is that right?
Sure they call the ship the Chrono Trigger, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought they did.
What do they call your egg?
The time egg.
The time egg. No, this literally they call it the Chrono Trigger. I was like,
weird.
Oh, okay, there it is. It had to pop up at some point, which, if you think about it, is like kind of is triggering Chrono. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Magic of translation.
Let's talk about, we have a couple other things, but I think we'll hold off on the magic leveling and the JRPG structure. We can do those next time. But let's talk a little bit about the few things that we did in common on the Faded Hour.
Okay. So at that point, we have the ship. We have Chrono back.
You can make whatever party we want.
You make whatever you put. That's what I wanted to mention. Yeah, you go back to the end of time, and literally now Chrono does not need to be in the party, which blows my mind. Which is not the case. Was that the case in Final Fantasy IX? I don't think it was, right? You had to have
Zidane.
Zidane, right? Is that a common thing? You always have to have the main protagonist?
It's sometimes true. It actually really depends on the story that they want to tell, because sometimes they'll split up parties and you get to pick, but somebody's going to lead this other one or something like that. I mean, it's very dependent on the narrative, and in this game it's not so much.
I thought it was cool. I'd be interested to know, like, from the other 2D Final Fantasy games, how much they did that, because for whatever, because of my very limited knowledge of the genre and the structure, that was for whatever reason, like blew me away. Because you just kind of assume that he's going to be around. Now I did choose to keep him because of the magic stuff, which we'll talk about next time, the magic leveling. Yes. Because I just decided to keep the 3 original ones once I got them back. But anyway, yeah, you can talk to everybody there. This is essentially the beginning of the Fated Hour, right? So you have the ship, which means you can
once
go
you
anywhere.
have Chrono back, you're in the Fated Hour.
Yeah, and then you're at the end of time. Now, one thing I want to mention that we talked about the other day when we were comparing notes about whether we should extend the cast is you can talk to the Gaspar there a fair amount, which I think I did a little bit more of than you did. And so you can talk to each of the party members. They give you a hint about something that is important to them. And then when I talked to Gaspar at one point, which maybe isn't even in your version, so we got Chrono back, we're all there at the end of time. I talked to him a couple of times, and then at one point he literally sort of lists out almost like quests, like things you could do at this point. So like he mentions like something which we're about to talk about as an example, he mentions I don't know if he said, I think he said Middle Ages. He said in the Middle Ages, a castle in the spirit of the Fiend Lord has been created. You should check that out. You know what I mean? So he kind of lists that. He lists the rainbow shell. He lists the desert. He lists, or he says something about a woman who's trying to grow some trees or something, Right. And I was like, hold on, slow down. I was like, what's all this stuff? Now, some of them I knew, right? Because I knew about Fiona. I knew that would be something we'd come back to. I knew about the rainbow shell, things like that. But it's a little overwhelming, right? Because now that we're in the Fated Hour, James, one of our listeners and someone who's written in a few times for this one, has mentioned this chapter, and I got a little overwhelmed because I was like, oh no, I should have been taking notes about all this stuff, because now, and partially it's because of my scouring of the world for those darn magical chests. I didn't want to have to go scour the world again to find all this stuff, but I did want to find them all. So hence we're extending the podcast so we have time to do that. But
so we have time to do all that stuff. Yeah.
So where did you go first?
So I can't remember what I was specifically looking for first. I was trying to, actually, so I first went to the desert because it was one I knew about. And I talked to Fiona, and I defeated the boss. Yeah. And then I came out. Yeah. And I came out and talked to her, and I'm like, I could have sworn there was somebody there was that woman who had the plant. So I was from 12,000 BC, the floating cities. I was like, oh, so if I could find her, that would be perfect.
She is in the village in that. Yeah.
Well, I eventually found that out. But what I did was I flew around in 12,000 a bit because I didn't remember her being in the village. I had seen her, and I just went over my head that's who she was. So I was trying to figure out where else there might be in 12,000. I finally was like, I give up on that. Went back to the desert, and then from where I was in 600, where the desert actually was physically, I went back in time thinking, okay, I'll go back in time. I'll be exactly where that plant would be, and I'll be able to maybe do something with the plant.
Oh, I haven't done that yet. So something
that was my no. Well, yes and no.
Something else.
Or I ended up at Ozzie's castle somehow doing all of this. I don't remember exactly, but I ended up next to that island. Okay, so that's in 600. Maybe it was something else I was trying to find. I can't remember what I was trying to do there. But I ended up going from a particular location, being like, oh, I'm going to try to go back to the same location in another time. And I was like, oh, cool, there's something here. And I went there, and it was Ozzie's fortress. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, well, that's not what I was expecting, but let's definitely go. And I walked in, and I was like, oh, it's Ozzie. and ended up having that whole thing.
And because you didn't talk to Gaspar the way I did, you didn't know to even look for that, right?
I did not know to look for that. I did not know that Ozzie was
These
a
are
thing
like
at that
pure
point.
discovery for you. I mean, we
For me,
didn't
it's
mention.
totally right.
I mean, James mentioned it for us last episode or whenever he mentioned it, but this chapter, like I told Brett in the pre-show, repeated here, like this game for me up to this point is definitely excellent, and I'm definitely loving it in general. You know, it's not necessarily my cup of tea in all ways, but when the Fated Hour, as James predicted, opened up, this I did freak out. Like it shot up the charts for me when you get the ship and you're literally, like Brett is saying, you can go to a location on the map, go to the time. You can not only fly anywhere you want on each individual map, but when you go back to a time using the other option for the ship, you end up in that same location, right? In the time that you're warping to, and it's just like pure freedom with all of this extra kind of not extra. I mean, I guess it is extra content. We were kind of calling it side stories, but it's almost like I don't even know if they're side stories. It's more of like
the power of having a ship, right? I mean, it's like you want to make the world right again,
Yeah, it's like you now it's like the victory lap or something. It's like you now have everything you need to do whatever you need to do. And
it makes sense that Gaspar would do that because he knows that he tells you the first time you meet him that you have to fix the timeline, kid, is basically what he says.
Yeah. And now this is what you're doing. It's just mind blowing. Yeah. James is right. It's like, this is what I was hoping for. It's for me at this point, it's probably 24 to 26 hours in. So there's some frustration we can talk about maybe next time on that, but, and I want to talk about the structure of the game, but yeah, so you found Ozzie's palace just from doing the good old Fated Hour exploration.
Yep. Just scouting all over the place,
which is essentially like a boss rush, almost kind of, right? Like a mini castle. But one question I had, I don't think there's really too much to talk about in that particular castle, unless you had some things other than Ozzie's great humor and how he actually ultimately dies again. That guy cracks me up. So with each of these locations, obviously the whole point of this is you do a thing in this time and it impacts something in the future. In that case, you beat him, and there's almost a little bit almost like loyalty quests in a BioWare game or something, which I can't imagine somebody at BioWare didn't play this game or some of these games and kind of like want some of that, because there's this sense of each character having its own little mini quest in this game. So I made sure I had Magus with me when you're going through that, because some of the bosses would even mention, "Oh, I'm conflicted about battling my old boss, but oh well," So it didn't end up really resulting in anything. But in your opinion, when you beat Ozzie, is the result of that essentially the state? Did you go to that location in the future to see what happened? Before I did
not find any changes from Ozzie disappearing.
Okay, so I have do you want? Well, do you want me to? You already did.
Yeah, go
Ozzie.
ahead.
So
it's fine. Yeah.
So if you go to that location in the future, that exact location in 1000, that is Medina. Essentially, that is where the town is, and so you go and start talking to basically everyone there is really happy. All the monsters there are really happy, and they're living with humans, like the humans. Interesting. The shopkeeper sells you stuff at a regular price. Is example. And you go to the tavern and like there's monsters and humans in there together. So I think what the Ozzie result is that you brought peace between the fiends and the humans essentially, and everyone's living happily ever after. I think that's why I wanted.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, I hadn't done that. It might have been the last. Was it the last thing I did? It might have been the last thing I did. So I may not have actually had the opportunity to try it yet. I don't remember now. I think I was continuing to fly around and try to figure out the desert thing. And I have a theory, and let's just end with the desert stuff.
Yeah.
So we can go to some emails. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that somebody said on the stream after I defeated the desert boss was like, Tim's going to find this easier to fix than Brett or something like that. Like, I bet Tim gets this one and Brett doesn't. And in the moment, I was like, I was thinking because you're such a nature dude, like that I'm missing something about you, right?
Yeah, right.
Not some. In the moment, I'm just like, oh, it's okay. Tim would know how to reforest a place, right? Was what I was thinking.
Yeah. What is the last thing Fiona said to you?
It's just something like, I'm glad you've finished the. I'm glad you figured out stop the desert from spreading or something. Now, if I could just bring back the forest, something like that. And that's what put me on to trying to find that lady who had the sapling. I was like, that totally. Which what?
I have not done that. I did not go find her.
Oh, you did not?
No. So that if that maybe gives you a hint that is not, if that's where you're thinking the solution is.
Oh, okay. So I had a theory about that, which was I decided that actually the difference between you and me as far as this game goes is not you being a nature guy. It's that you have different party members.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct.
So my theory was go to the woman with the sapling and take the one character who could live basically forever and has the robot.
Yeah.
And let the robot deal with the tree.
Right.
Am I right?
You want me to say? You want me to confirm?
No,
or
I'm gonna go do that anyway, because that's what I think is that is what I was gonna do the first thing next time I play.
I say is warm. You're warm.
I'm warm. Okay.
Think it, but you're very warm. Yeah. You're not.
I knew it had certainly something about the party makeup. Oh, but even just talking to Fiona maybe would do it. Like.
So Fiona does say, which you already, I think, know, you just forgot exactly what she said. She said it's going to take forever to reforest this desert. Okay, yes. I'm going to need a lot of help or something.
Yeah, okay, right. So there may be a little more in your translation. I do remember her saying it will take a long time or something like that, but not that she's going to need help. Yeah, but that would make sense. But instead for it to...
Yeah, the person on the stream is correct. They're sort of like... It's like for me, it wasn't even a puzzle because something sort of automatically
had the character. I know it. Okay. Yeah. Well, that is what I will do. The first thing I do next time when people.
Not to spoil anything for next episode, but that whole sequence is amazing. I know I don't want to talk it up too much because maybe you won't agree, but for somebody who has had him the whole game. And just sort of what ends up happening with the whole, not even just the next step that you're going to hit, but the kind of next two steps after that, because what results in that whole thing, it will, so good.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So, now we're going to take a break because that's what I'm looking forward to now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Welcome back from the break. We, of course, have a few emails. We actually have a couple this time that are about our prior game, Civ 3. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Why don't you go ahead and hit me with that first one?
Subject is Civilization 3 from Wild Weasel. Hi, guys. First-time listener and new fan here. Congrats on passing 200 episodes. I've been following Soren for a while and playing Civ 3 since its release, so naturally I was excited to hear him on the other side of the table to talk specifically about my old-time favorite game. One thing that kept coming up in the series was the difficulty in knowing what to offer the AI in trade. Surprisingly, nobody pointed out that your foreign advisor will help you out here. As you add or remove items from the proposal, the floating advisor panel will update to tell you how the AI will respond and how close you are to a deal. He won't give you exact numbers, but if he suggests they will probably accept, then it's good. This way, you can guess and check your way to an optimal deal before making the offer. It's especially useful especially useful to wring every last drop out of a peace treaty. That's a great line. I know you went in pretty blind and obviously didn't have time to explore everything, but as a longtime mod maker, I missed hearing about one of the strongest points of Civ 3, the potential and ease of modding. With the included scenario editor and the accessible asset files, plus some early elbow grease from the community, Civ 3 has had one of the most successful modding scenes of the genre. Players can make their own maps, scenarios, and rule changes with just a few simple tools and no programming. We have everything from rebalancing to constrained historical simulations to themed total conversions. If you're interested in spending any time with Civ 3, I highly encourage you to check out some of the popular mods from Civilization Fanatics Center. Happy civing and keep up the great podcast. Good luck to Tim on his walk in the woods. I'm envious, especially given present circumstances. Wild Diesel.
Yeah,
I'm
Wild may not have
Tim
caught up
too.
yet.
I actually did encounter the thing he was talking about with the trade, and I forgot to bring it up. I discovered it on the last session where
I had seen it. Yeah. I had seen it too, and well, first of all, welcome Wild. Always nice to have a new listener and emailer.
Yes.
Yeah, I had also seen that. I guess it was also just the sort of the chipping away that was just kind of like I could see that it was like, oh, I think this is a good offer or something like that, or whatever it would say. But it was it's like what, how much I should. It was also the combinations of things like, okay, what if I give them this tech and then this, how much money and, is there any amount of money? There's so much just chipping away at trying to get to the best deal that I did not. Yeah. I saw that, but I didn't feel it helped the fundamental problem.
You didn't wring every last drop out of a peace treaty.
I certainly did not wring any drops out of peace treaties because I basically didn't do that much at that point because I had the easy version of the game. The other thing was the modding. It came up a little bit talking with Soren in the interview. Not a ton, but he did specifically talk about how modifiable the asset files were because they were all just XML or something along those lines, some very regular format, all in text, and how he had to build the AI as well around that, around knowing that all that stuff was going to be in data and he would not know anything about the buildings and all that stuff, which is a very, which is a good way to think about the problem. I think it actually makes the AI even a little bit harder to do in some ways, but no, I mean, great on him. And yeah, it's not something we typically do with the cast to spend time with mods, even for games that we know have big mod sort of, audiences and contributors and scenes and what have you, because we're trying to talk about the game and all of that specifically. Something to consider, for the future if we get another one along those lines.
Yeah, it's a whole category that we could have talked about a lot. We hit it in Doom maybe a tiny bit, but Doom's a great example.
Yep, yeah, that's true. I have a second email about Civ from Johnny Gratin. You may remember Johnny writing in. The subject is Civ 3 update number 2 from inside the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Good day, gentlemen. I am here to give my second update on my Civ 3 progress as the Japanese. Yes. For that, though, I have some quick questions. Does developing a game similar to Civ 3 sound appealing to you? What would be good and or bad about it? So we'll come back to that and answer that question. Now on to the update. After allowing the Koreans, my closest neighbors, to pay me rightful tribute for a number of turns, I brought the Koreans fully into the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. I tried the same induction technique on the Chinese and was doing well until I attempted some parallelization by accelerating my timetable for the Russians. I overextended my reach, the Americans got involved, and things got messy. Although I won the game on points, I was not able to bring even everyone on my continent within the sphere. The Chinese and then the Russians came over, but those stubborn Americans still held out in New York, Boston, and Washington, as not to mention the Spanish and Portuguese prancing around on the other main continent. To be honest, I am not sure if they even know my sphere existed. Historically, kind of interesting parallel. My biggest learning from this playthrough was that my inability to make alliances really cost me. It seems like the AI figured out pretty quickly that I was a backstabbing maniac and stopped doing deals with me, which meant I was fighting my wars alone. So I had to play another game, which I did. I upped the difficulty to Regent, third easiest, stuck with the Japanese, but changed my strategy. Instead of going for early military aggression, I played a civilized game, making solid alliances and strong trade relations while I took time to sharpen my knife to stab my allies in the back. On this playthrough, I enjoyed the alliances I made in attacking enemies together with those allies. It felt oddly realistic as we seemed to jockey to carve out the choicest cities for ourselves and each selflessly avoiding taking too much damage to our own units while maximizing unit damage to our allies. The underhanded Spanish were particularly good at grabbing the cities of our enemies before me. I also really enjoyed the culture mechanic, even when it meant my cities flipping to the enemy. However, I had a moment to feel remorse for the collateral damage I caused when I used bombers as my main offensive unit to attack cities, because those cause citizens in the cities to be killed. Especially when taking back those flipped cities, as the game keeps track of the original nationality of the citizens. It was tough, but ultimately a sacrifice I was willing to make. I achieved a domination victory by 2013 with only the Spanish maintaining any sort of presence of power. I am positive that I would be able to bring the Spanish and Russians inside the sphere, but not those wily Chinese. They have a single city on a single tiled island, and I have no idea how I can take it. I can bomb it all I like, but I can't land on it even when I remove all their military units, so I can't take it out, and so the Chinese remain. Totally unacceptable. I was planning on playing along with Chrono Trigger, but I just want to try one more strategy, the next difficulty level for Civ 3. Just one more game. But first, some sleep. Best Pockets, which he notes is his real pseudonym. So thank you, Pockets. Let me repeat the questions. Those are great updates of the co-prosperity sphere. Does developing a game similar to Civ 3 sound appealing to you? What would be good and or bad about it? You sir, you go ahead.
That's a lot of inner turmoil over that question for me, because I think I mentioned on the series how deep of some holes I fell down, especially with Beyond Earth, which I played much, much longer after we finished the series. And so I have a great appreciation for them. I think as a developer, though, I tend to be a pretty obsessive, compulsive sort of developer, and I worry about myself. I guess the answer is probably not be appealing to me, because I worry about myself obsessing about the sort of, as I was calling through the series, the spreadsheet aspect of the game and kind of the numbers and the balance and how everything works together. I feel like when we talked to Soren, he gave me a good perspective on almost like embracing the chaos of the whole thing and not sweating what I think I probably would sweat if I were working on a game like this. I'd like to think that I'm wrong on that, but I don't think I am. I think I would just be miserable because I would just obsess about things that I shouldn't, and probably drive the team crazy over it, to be honest.
Yeah. I could see that. You did, in fact, play a substantial amount of Beyond Earth. I played between 9 and 10 hours, whereas you played a little north of 41 hours of Beyond Earth. So, and
that was like in a week, too. Like a week
it's a massive amount of Beyond Earth. It's good to know you have a full-time Beyond Earth job over there. For me, I would say I probably would not want to build one of those. Although talking to Soren was really personally rewarding to feel more like, oh, okay, I see how I would develop one. I can see now how you do it, which was what, seeing the completed product, I had no idea how to do it, right? I just was overwhelmed by even, so I got a lot of confidence from that. I think for me, the thing that doesn't sound appealing is just going the distance on it, because I think that there's a lot of balancing, certainly, but also just, I don't know. I mean, it feels like it's a thing where you kind of keep glomming stuff on, and I'd really enjoy the early part when I just kind of built how I was going to do it and solve the problems of how I was going to add to it. But actually adding a ton of stuff to it, I don't know. I think I would lose steam, especially because I'm not a super history buff. I think that came through a little bit in the discussions. I'm not. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know some history. The subject matter has not worked for me. So I don't know. I did enjoy that a little bit more in Beyond Earth, but I also didn't feel the need to go back to that either. So, I think I would have a hard time just sustaining myself over the length of a project. Which is a real thing, right? I mean,
you need to have that investment of some kind. And that's, I think, that's why I did like Beyond Earth more, I think, because I'm also not as much into the sort of realistic historical context. And I love the science fiction stuff, and they dabbled with and fooled with stuff enough there to keep me interested. But maybe a sci-fi or fantasy, one of these I might be interested in. But I think both of us have a sort of desire for some beginning, middle, and end to things too, and this is intentionally, and this isn't a slight or anything, this is intentionally like a never ending kind of thing, building this game is about building. It's just a whole different way of thinking about development. You're building a series of things that are interlocking and interwoven into each other and how they all interact, not as much sort of like a flow or a pacing that, that players will have similar sort of experiences with. But it's still amazing, and I definitely fell down those holes, so I can appreciate it. And the previous email, I think, is one of my favorite things about it, is that you just people can tell stories about a game as if it were a story. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though it is a pure sim, and those are great. That mail was great. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if I were to build
it's this mail. I'm
this
combining
mail. Yeah,
the questions and his update.
Yeah. I think given the two, I would probably be more interested in something like XCOM.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think that would, and it's not even so much the science fiction aspects, although that's pleasing. It was really talking to Julian Gollop about that made me just open my eyes up to you could totally just build this in a way that it's not crazy difficult to build, at least the large scale, the macro AI, but it could still be interesting and obscure, right? I mean, this is very hard to know what's going on. Whereas, the Civ one feels more like everybody's picking at it all the time, in some ways, describing, them uncovering, if I move a single unit out of a city to another one across the map, it makes the whole armada have to go all the way around the continent or whatever. I mean, it's just that stuff would drive me. That would be the part where I'd have difficulty sustaining myself, of just how am I going to solve that problem without creating some new problem? And that I think would drive me wild. But I don't know. It is an interesting challenge. So, and I'm glad to have had the conversation with him and feel okay, I know how to tackle that challenge now. Maybe I would have gotten there if I actually had to do it, but I never had to. So I never had to really think through it. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take one Chrono Trigger mail. We have a couple others, but they are for, hey, you've finished the game type discussions, and we haven't. So I put them off till next week.
Okay. Subject is Chrono Trigger from the Second Quest. Hello, Quest. Hey guys, it's been great listening to a series on Chrono Trigger. I have fond memories of the game. There's a good chance it was the first real RPG game I played thoroughly, as opposed to more action-adventure fare like Zelda and Illusion of Gaia, or more limited, older titles like Dragon Warrior, which I quickly abandoned. Listening to your accounts of moments in the game has triggered recollections of those events I had forgotten for many years, though. In parentheses, he says, recollections triggered across time. A Chrono Trigger? Sorry, I'll show myself out. Back when it first came out, I easily rented this from the video store as a kid more times in a row than any other title. Sadly, I wasn't able to complete it before I ran out of successful let me rent this again arguments with my parents. I set out to purchase the game within a few months after saving up enough, but alas, the store no longer had it in stock. You had one job, Toys R Us, which made it difficult to circle back around to at the time. Jump ahead a decade or so, and I started to eye the DS port, but it too tended to not be in stock when I had the cash to spare for an impulse buy. Thankfully, my pursuit came to a close when I found a loan copy of a Black Friday on a bargain shelf of all places. But as is my bad habit, it has sat on the shelf waiting ever since. But your series has now informed me of the translation differences that exist across the different versions of the game, and I think I might actually let the DS version sit even longer. Without the old English-style dialogue of the frog, I'm not sure it would feel like I would be completing the same game I played so long ago. Instead, I think I'll try to track down a copy of the SNES version and finally close the circle on the game. The game seemed to often top lists of the best games of all time for many years, so I have no doubt that this enduring appeal in combination with the multiple endings to the game will eventually result in the DS copy getting the first play replay one day. Thanks for the heads up. It's been an informative series quest, unless you get the newer translation, in which case, Billy. Yeah, I mean,
it has made it tough for us to talk about it at times because, I mean, coupled with my sort of like forgetfulness about individual things that characters say, trying to capture what they said in my translation, look no further than the last week's introduction debacle of Tim having no idea what I was talking about.
Right.
With the plate full of sashimi. Yeah.
Well, you know, I have a regret similar to Quest/Billy's that because I'm obviously, as everyone listening knows, I'm a big fan of Frog. And so I am really bummed that I'm not getting the Old English stuff as well, especially being a Shakespeare nerd myself. And so it seems perfect for him, and I'm bummed that it's not in there. On the other hand, I have been impressed with the translation I do have, especially with Robo's lines, and really like most of the reactions of other people to Robo. Specifically, as an example, some notes. I write down quotes in my notes often about things that he says or things that people say about him. But bringing both Frog and Robo back to your mom after late in the game, because I've done like a rescouring of the world multiple times at this point, and I go just to see if somebody says something different, and there's just some hilarious reactions where Chrono's mom's trying to figure out what the heck Robo is and like who the frog guy is, and she kind of accidentally offends him, but then they apologize or something. It's just hilarious. So like it's hard to say which one's better. I just am saying that I haven't been disappointed with mine for the most part, at least with the characters I've had. But I'm really interested, Second Quest, as you describe your situation, where you ended up stopping. If you haven't fully finished it.
From back when he was playing on the SNES, yeah.
Yeah, because am I reading that right? That he stopped and he's been trying to find a version ever since to start over, but he's not finished it yet. So I don't know, like this game is, unless he got pretty far in, this is a crazy game, you know, and so there's so much, like you said, there's so many different endings, it sounds like, but also it can go so many different places depending on where you've gotten to, especially with the Fated Hour. So,
and with the exploring the different character mixes is just
I mean, this
phenomenal to me.
This is a replay game for sure. I can see why James replays it every year, like you said, or whatever, however often he said, because you can just see how it can be a completely different, you know, game in some ways.
And unlike a lot of JRPGs, this is not an unmanageable length, right? I mean,
right.
I mean, we squeezed Final Fantasy IX into 5 episodes, but we were pushing it.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Well, I didn't really finish,
and you didn't.
Right? So.
Yeah, you didn't really finish. I did a lot of side content, but I just got kind of sucked in at one point and spent a whole day looking for Chocobo Heaven or whatever. You know, and all this side content that I had not seen the first time I had played it. Even when I had played it at a more leisurely pace, I had missed. A lot of JRPGs are more like that are just massive. And I'm playing Wasteland 2 now, and just like, that's a game that apparently can be replayed, but it's gonna probably be 40 hours. And I just look at that and go, probably not. You know, it's rare for me to replay a JRPG. I'm certainly not going to replay Persona 5 at 100 hours. No way. It was 107.5 hours. That's not counting how many times I died. So
any game that has inherently built into its essentially pacing and flow any kind of grind, like I can't imagine replaying, you know, that. Even this really, and Chrono Trigger really doesn't. That's a good point. There's not a lot of grinding. No, that's the thing. I mean, we talked about last episode, I think, and I think we'll talk about it more next episode as well. But the way that the level scaling happens, and just the pacing and the sort of, at least up to the Fated Hour, the linear aspect of it, you know, they pretty much know what you can be able to, what you may be able to do gating. Or have, right? So so it's essentially a linear game. So there's no need for that, and I think I definitely enjoy it more for that. I don't know why grinding. I mean, I know it's ridiculous that I am being critical of grinding in JRPGs when I still play WoW. So I will admit to that, because it's really the same thing. But I don't know what the difference is for me. Yeah, I don't either, man. I mean, JRPGs are just better, so it's weird. Anyway, well, now thanks for your emails sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. I've been mentioning it for a few weeks now, but we still have not gotten any new reviews, and we'd love them. So if you have an opportunity to sling a review our way, newer listeners may not know that if you put in a review with a song about Dev Game Club that parodies another song, I will sing it on the air. So you can look forward to that, or I don't know. But anyway, anything you have to say, we'd love to hear it, and as well as any feedback to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, where we post the show notes every week, or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end. I have been streaming Wasteland 2, which I just mentioned, on twitch.tv/Brett Duville nightly. On the weekends, I play whatever we're playing for the cast. Our outro music, which you should be hearing now, is by Kirk Hamilton and was commissioned by our friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. Thanks so much to both of them. Enjoy playing games this week, and good night. Good night.